And we are back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek. And we're currently focused, and still focused rather, on Star Trek The Next Generation. And today's episode is the Drumhead, a very, very exciting episode. And I'm joined not just by Sir Guy, but also by the wonderful Starfleet lady.
Ooh,
Yes. So it's
What's
nice to
up?
have you.
hi.
It's nice to have both of you back because I've had you guys
What's
on
up?
separately.
Yeah, and I feel like it's been a while since I've been on.
It's me, Sir Guy. Did that sound as sexy as I thought it did?
No, I think that was scared.
Sir Guy.
I think you're scaring people away.
I can just edit him out, so it's fine. He can do whatever he wants. But I am the control. Get off my bridge, Jamie. No, I'm just kidding. But today's also another. Today's a special Starfleet Boy episode, also because it's Starfleet Boy After Dark, and these don't happen very often. If you watch, the majority of Starfleet Boys are recorded in the daytime.
Yeah, we're morning people.
We are, yeah. I don't know. I'm both.
Yeah, I could go.
Okay, well, I'm a morning person.
Monday through Friday, I'm a morning person. On Saturdays, and some extended weekends, I'm a night person. What were we talking about? Oh yes, the Drumhead.
So that's this week's episode.
This week's episode is the Drumhead, and I'm just losing myself in silly ways because I'm so excited that both of you are on the show. It's been a while. We are good friends in real life, and so we actually this is like
we enjoy doing this.
Yeah, it's nice.
I look forward to it.
Yay! Me too. Simon, the last time you were on it when I still lived in Seattle.
Yes, wow, yeah, that's true.
And it was a live show. You were with me in person.
Oh, that was so fun.
What star date was that?
So that's I don't currently have a full-time database boy. So the computer's down at the moment, so I'm gonna have to guess at what star date it was, but I'm guessing it was sometime in September.
That's when I visited you, was September.
Yeah, so September. So that would put it at stardate 9 4 2.1178.
Oh yeah, totally.
That's the first official star date on Starfleet Boy, by the way. So for people who are aspiring to be my database boy, if you can write that down in your databases and let me know.
Glad we already got a first on this episode.
It's so true. So would you guys like to do the episode summary, or shall I do it?
Yeah, you know what? Why don't you? It's a pretty dense episode. Why don't you start by giving the summary, and then we'll fill in.
Okay, sounds good. Help me out because it's been 2 days since I've seen the episode, so I might be a little rusty. Basically, the let's see here. Oh yeah, the Enterprise is cruising along, and there's this like crazy interrogation scene where they're interrogating a Klingon exchange student or exchange officer who is some kind of biologist, like an exobiologist. Thank you, an exobiologist. And he, what do exobiologists do? Do you know, Simon?
I don't know what the term exo means.
Oh yeah, there was some whack terminology in this episode.
Yeah,
we'll get to that later.
Anyways, so they're interrogating this guy. Oh, I have my notes. Hold on. Why not use the notes that you took, Sohail? Hold on, here we go. Jadan. His name's Jadan.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
So Klingon Jadan is being interrogated by Counselor Troy and Commander Riker, and Worf is is there, I think, in the sidelines, and they basically discover that he is a Romulan spy. Do you guys know what the Romulans are in Star Trek?
The bad guys.
Yeah, totally.
pretty much. That's as much as I know about it.
That's as much as I know about it, and I
Do
can.
you guys know the Vulcans?
Oh yeah.
So Mr. Spock is a Vulcan, and Vulcans have an evil twin race called the Romulans. They look just like Vulcans, really, except they update them now, so they look a little different. But in the original series, they look just like Vulcans. And so, anyway, the Romulans are the big bad of the Next Generation, but they kind of don't really ever go to war with them. It's just like a Cold War.
Oh, yeah, that's the Star Trek thing to do.
Yeah,
it's so good for budget.
Anyways, Jadan is a Romulan conspirator, and they then ask him if he's responsible for an explosion that just happened on the Enterprise, which is why the investigation started. And he's like, I had nothing to do with this stupid explosion. I'm here to sabotage you in other ways, and whatever happens. And so, anyways, they get Starfleet involved because now they think like, oh, maybe there's other conspirators. And Starfleet sends Admiral Satie, played by Gene Simmons, who I only knew her from like when I was a kid. I saw Guys and Dolls, and she's also in Spartacus.
Right. And of course she's the bassist of Kiss, right?
No.
Yeah, going out, wears all the makeup.
That is definitely her. You're absolutely right. But she was in Hell's Moving Castle. I saw that on her IMDb. So that I definitely saw.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, but she's like a phenomenal actress. Everything I read about her says that I missed out on an extraordinary actress's career. Like I knew who she was, I just didn't know how great she was. And so they send Gene Simmons because that's who you said.
Satie?
Yeah, no, I know, but it's Gene Simmons. Like they just were like, Patrick, we're gonna put you up against Shakespeare heavyweight Gene Simmons, you know, like
and rock and roll heavyweight. Let's not forget that.
So yeah, Gene Simmons, aka Admiral Satie, is sent to the Enterprise, and at first I was totally like, I remember when she first came on screen when I saw this episode for the first time, I was totally blown away by her. She like wore this insane, couture dress that, she's fabulous. And Picard is everyone's enamored by her. She's an illustrious career. She's like the daughter of Judge Admiral Satie, who is also illustrious and like, one of the kind of heroes of the Federation on the legal side.
This is this is a little side note, but I, in my mind, also like to imagine, as I was watching the episode, this is true, that she was a distant relative of famed composer Erik Satie.
I know. Oh, wow. Very nice.
So, which is big considering they have Gene Simmons playing this other legendary musician. But
Jamie,
yeah.
Jamie, it's not the same Gene Simmons.
You don't know who's underneath all that makeup, and don't tell me what I can and cannot think.
Audience, Jamie is wrong.
Start a poll. Start a poll after this episode.
Why else would the episode end with her sticking out her tongue and giving the devil horns?
Oh my god, that's amazing. Okay, so before I
you got too sidetracked.
There. So anyways, she tears it up on the Enterprise and starts a witch hunt, crazy investigation, and they come to very quickly to crewman or medical officer Simon Tarsus, who's like kind of nerdy, kind of shy, kind of awkward.
I love him so well.
I did kind of love I was like, oh.
He's a sweetie.
He's a
Total
sweetie. He's
sweetie.
very nice guy. Anyways, he did make a mistake though. He lied on his application. He said that he was half Vulcan when in fact his grandfather was a Romulan. So anyways, this is something that is uncovered through a lot of exposition, including something that we could talk about more during the episode, which is the Betazoid character, who is one of Judge Satie's aides. She does not travel lightly. She always has two people with her in every room. One person's recording everything that's happening, and the other person's just reading your mind.
She's like a diva.
She is. She's the devil. The devil wears spacesuit.
That's ooh. That, now there's a movie.
There's a movie. The devil wears spacesuit. Anyways, she gets all fired up because she realizes that, you know, so far she's been retired and all this stuff, and so she's been brought out of retirement, and she can end her, you know, not end her career, but like, you know, go out with a bang. Like, so I think that's what her motivation was here, maybe. So she starts interrogating just about everyone, and she even starts to interrogate Jean-Luc Picard because he wants to end this witch hunt. He's like, this is not right. Like, you know, Simon Tarsus is innocent. Da da da. And then, so wait, before all that, we also discover a crucial piece of evidence, which is that the explosion that we thought was sabotage was actually just an accident. There's inconclusive proof, but even then, Judge Satie just keeps going. She doesn't want to stop. She's she's got to find the cancer and remove it.
Yeah, you could almost say she wants to go after the trial all night and every day. Kind of like she might want to rock and roll.
Wow. Okay.
I want to prosecute all night. File papers every day.
Hey, yeah. I'm glad we're all on the same page.
We are all on the same page. Always. So yeah, so she doesn't like that he's trying to stop her, and she's like, well, she pulls out another one of her cards, and she says, I've been in touch with Starfleet Command this whole time, and Admiral Thomas Henry, I think that was his actual name. I don't remember. And Admiral Thomas Henry of Starfleet Security is on his way, and he's going to witness. And then, to add insult to injury, she subpoenas Picard to the interrogation. So the next day, Picard walks in. He gets to sit down and give one of the greatest Star Trek speeches.
It's really fantastic.
It's a really fantastic speech. It also tells you a lot about the world they live in. So it's like a very good, like, there's a good, you know, if you want to know about Star Trek episode. And he just destroys her by letting her kind of spiral out of control with her, you know, questioning and everything like that. He uses his words wisely. And the Admiral even gets up and walks out. He's like, I don't want to watch this shit show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
I wish someone was like, this is like side note, I wish it was real life and someone was like live tweeting that from the inside.
You know, her assistant totally like switched to space Twitter and was like, holy shit, it's going down. Putting her resume up on every like version of LinkedIn, spaced in. I don't know, whatever it would be called.
Wow.
Universed in.
And then just there we see the mighty Judge Nora Satie fall in disgrace, and then we see Picard rise, and the ideals, the actual true ideals of the Federation, come to light. And then it ends in this beautiful scene with Worf, who was antagonizing Picard throughout the whole episode about whether or not the witch hunt was valid or not, or necessary, comes to apologize to Captain Picard. And there's a nice touching moment where, you know, Picard's like, basically, you're off the hook because, you know, who could see beyond her good deeds? Like, she and the Betazoid guy really played Worf, and tried to play everyone. And so that's it. And then he says, and so we have to fight this fight every single day, Mr. Wolf.
I believe his words are something along the lines of, "It's easy to spot a villain who's twirling their mustache,
Ooh,
but it ain't easy to see past good deeds." And I thought that was pretty deep. Thought it was pretty good.
Oh,
that is the price we have to pay, continually pay.
yeah, there were some really good quotes
Yeah.
from Picard this whole episode.
Yeah, it's true.
All right. Well, that was a good summary.
Really?
Yeah,
Thought it
that was a pretty
loosey
decent
goosey,
summary.
but- oh, good. Okay, okay.
All right.
Now we
yeah.
can go back to like catching up and
Talking.
what did
Right.
Jamie called it inside baseball last time? He did not enjoy that.
I mean, I want every listener to feel included here.
I do too. It's true. You're right.
So, I mean, yes. I don't know. I really like this episode. It was one of those episodes. It's very heady, because it's like basically pummeling you with a variety of political ideas, in every scene, and it's tense. Like this episode starts out in a very tense interrogation scene, between Judan and I guess
And Riker and Troy.
Riker and Troy. That's right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like it just starts with people being real angry at each other. Worf is like escorting Judan back to his quarters and ends up getting into like a tussle with him.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. He's just like destroys it. Like he's just like because Jadan's like trying to convince him to
He's trying to coerce him into helping.
coerce him into helping him to free him to let him just escape. That's right.
Yeah, it was intense. And then Worf is just like, yeah, fuck this, and just like totally destroys Judan, and it's great. But like that's the opening of the episode, so it really sets the tone for the intensity that's about to come. I liked it. I liked it a lot.
It's like you're jumping
I
ahead to the
think
end.
no, I
Yeah,
mean, well,
that's
we
my
kind
review.
of yeah. That's it. You did.
I'm glad Worf punched
So,
someone.
I think that it's okay to get the like. So normally we follow a strict format of like we have a discussion and we talk about it. And I think my friends who I call them the Starfleet boy irregulars because there's like four. We sometimes do Star Trek Discovery conversations. It's like five of us on at the same time, and it can get pretty insane. So we try to follow a formula because during the course of the discussion, you may change your mind about your rating. But I'm actually of the mind that this episode is probably unrateable. So for me, it gets an automatic 10. It's just like one of those rare episodes where you can tell that it's going to be around as a teaching tool or something,
definitely.
Yeah.
for decades and, maybe
Well,
even
if
generations.
we're going around, and then I'll add that I love the episode as well. And just to touch upon what you just said, Sohail, there's things about this episode, and I think you guys might agree, that's like really irrelevant to 2018 and the current political climate in which we live.
100%.
Didn't see it at all. All of it is so relevant.
I know, it's true. It's intense. So yeah, it's it's a. So what do you want to go and give your ratings so we can get it out of the way and just talk about
it? 10 on 10.
Woo!
Yeah, I'd probably give it a 10.
Yes.
I think to add to something you said, I was literally like, I was watching the episode and I was like, did they make this to be like studied in like college philosophy classes? I just felt like it was it felt too smart to be a network television show. It was really, really good. Awesome. And yeah, I mean, Sima touched on it, but every theme that was explored felt so relevant to current times as well, which is probably saying a lot about how much progress has been made in the last 30 years. But yeah, it was amazing to listen to the kind of virtues of swift justice be debated on the Starfleet, and yeah,
The writer ought to get 100% credit for everything we love about it, of course. And what you said, I think, about like whether it was intentionally like made to be like something that was gonna like, I wonder, like like it's such a deep episode. Like I feel like the writer, I don't know anything about the writer or the story. I know that the writer's name is Jerry Taylor. Um he was born June 30th of 1938, so he was already like an older writer, I
Oh
guess,
wow.
oh
by
yeah,
the time. Yeah,
Oh.
so he wrote for all the Star Treks of the time, it looks like.
right.
Let's see, he wrote for Star Trek Voyager, Star Trek The Next Generation. Yeah, he's a pretty good writer.
I mean,
Looks
in
like
many ways, I suspect if you were born in 38 and lived in America, lived through, say, the civil rights movement
mhm.
and, uh, a few other, and just lived to see the prison and justice systems take the form they did, then
They did, yep.
even by the late 80s, early 90s, I'm pretty sure.
Jerry Taylor was very tuned in, and also tuned in to being a good writer, because yeah, it's a great episode, and it definitely feels like he was a bit prophetic in many of the things that this episode addresses. But Star Trek is um it's not it's that's like not like, something that this episode did for the first time. I think like there were other moments throughout Star Trek that kind of were way ahead of their time, but also
Mhm.
very relevant, because I think like we see things happening every day and around us, and like, we tune into the news as much as we can process. I mean, like we're only one, like we're only, as humans, we can only process so much until we
Yeah, it's
until we
overwhelming.
it's overwhelming. But you do see like patterns emerging and things like that, and if you're studied in history, just like lightly studied in history, you know that what major events not to allow history to repeat. so
Yeah.
so when you see like things come to pass like this, I think it's important to do something like what Jerry Taylor did, and like, stand on your soapbox and like and just do it. And I
Yeah.
think he did it in like an amazing and brilliant way, because on top of being a very important, relevant message for, humans to like think about, it's very entertaining.
Oh yeah.
Got to get a
It's
quick little tidbit out there. We need to correct ourselves. Jerry Taylor was a woman.
Oh
Uh,
shit. I've been
so,
calling you a he this whole time. Ah.
yes, sincerest apologies to anyone who knew that.
Everyone probably knows that.
Yeah.
But Jerry Taylor, if you're listening to this, please forgive us. I
See,
guess Jerry with an I is female.
I suppose
And Jerry with
so.
a Y is male, and I'm not gender trained enough to know that.
It's a beautiful name.
It is a beautiful name. Anyways, Jerry Taylor, if you're, oh my gosh, I hate this part. I have to look up and see something about Jerry Taylor now.
You're gonna look up because I've been making when you look this up. If I may just add, there's three
Yes.
quotes that I wrote down because I took notes,
Ooh.
and there's three quotes that really stood out to me. One is decisions are quick and the punishment is severe.
Yes.
The road from suspicion to paranoia is shorter than we think.
Oh, that was classic.
That was so good.
And spreading fear in the name of vigilance. Those are three quotes from Captain Picard that I wrote down that really stood out to me.
Yeah, there was a lot of good quotes from Picard in this episode. It was like uh, just nonstop quotables. I mean, he was like, he embodied like everything you want the ideals of justice in a society to embody. And it was such a like fist pumping moment anytime he'd say anything, but then
Oh yeah, he had the best lines.
it would be like disheartening to realize that this episode was written so long ago. And it probably felt just as good to hear it then as it does
30
now.
I could tell you what it felt like 30 years ago. Um as a teenager watching this, I at that time I think what might have been relevant was basically the kind of police brutality and kind of like mass imprisonment in the urban areas, especially for black people
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
in our country. So I remember like Rodney King might have been around this time and some other things. So uh, I think Star Trek was like always touching on relevant like events that were occurring during the time it was written. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was like trying to like bring light to our court system and our justice system and like a lot of heavy things. Like
Yeah.
everything from like, you know, being aged out of your profession and like like to the point where it's like when you retire, a message of like it's time to retire sometimes and stay retired, like Judge Satie, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
to just like the fact that this is something that goes on all the time
Mhm.
in our
Yeah.
country. It's like rampant, and I think that like generational shifts are definitely something that like are important to consider, and in Star Trek I think this was touching on that as well. But regardless, what I remember was being inspired by this episode to be more vocal and active in school. I was still in high school, about how I felt about these current events that were occurring, because for a long time growing up, I was like, I don't know if I was taught this, but I favored being quiet and just being on the sidelines. And it's still actually my default personality.
You,
Um,
Sohail?
oh yeah. Sometimes the most gregarious people are probably the shyest. um, but certainly here, that was the takeaway from a personal perspective. And I remember then joining discussions that I'd never previously had joined before, and expressing ideas that I only thought about and about what was going on in our country at the time. And it was very empowering, and it was also like wonderful because it connected me to both friendly adversaries, because they were my friends that I was talking to, and also to like-minded people who could help me like and encourage me further.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's really nice to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So that's what it did for me. I don't know what it did for the times we lived in.
I don't think the episode got to Congress.
No, it didn't. No, it definitely didn't.
I'm just seeing now this episode is actually still older than I am. So,
Wow.
but younger than Saima.
Oh, it aired like about a month and a half after I was born.
Oh my God, this like you guys have just like blown my mind, because I know exactly what I was doing and where I was when I saw this episode. So now I know exactly what I was doing when both of you were born. That's really creepy.
That is kind of scary. Yeah.
I don't find it creepy. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Because I don't know. It's not creepy. It's creepy in a good way. It's like, oh, Twilight Zone creepy.
Yeah.
If that makes
Okay.
any
Love the Twilight
sense.
Zone. So when we get to Twilight Boy, just make sure to have me
I
on.
will. Hey, just before we started the podcast, you guys were asking about my tracksuit, and so
Yes.
Yeah.
so I now wear a tracksuit to let people know when I'm not working.
That's
Even though-
actually a super Star Trek thing. You have an
Yeah,
outfit
it is,
for
right?
when you're
I'm
recreational,
working.
like on
Yeah,
leisure.
exactly right.
I have a
It's
question.
true.
How many tracksuits do you own right now?
Currently, I only have 2.
So you gotta like
Alternate.
alternate when you're washing.
Yes, the problem is that I only like red top. My tops are the same right now. I know I should probably just get another color.
Wait, those tracksuits are your planet Ryza.
Oh yeah.
That's
That's
a
true.
pretty good Star Trek, like deep cut. I feel like I just did it. I just connected with the audience.
It's more than that though. It's like if you see me in since like okay, well think about this for a second, guys. On the Enterprise, there is no other way for people to know whether you're working or you're not than the uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because if you're in, even though this happens all the time, they're always like in 10 Forward, we talked about this in the last episode, Sima. They're always getting drunk in the daytime in the lounge. And so
Yeah.
sometimes you see people in uniform getting drunk, and then sometimes you see people wearing like weird future garments
Leisure at leisure.
at leisure. So this is my way of so when I'm wearing this, I'm on duty as Starfleet boy, but I'm off duty as Sohail.
Well, now we know what to get you for your birthday.
Yay! Oh my goodness. Which is coming up very soon.
It is.
I'm turning 40. I'm 10 years older than Star Trek The Next Generation.
That's that also kind of puts things in perspective for me.
Yeah, see?
Wow.
Star Trek The Next Generation started when I turned 11 because I think I turned 11.
That's like a perfect age to be watching this show.
It's true. And then so by this episode I was 14.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
I know, so that's the teenager that you don't know.
That's actually
that I just painted a picture of him for you.
I feel like that's very like puts a lot of things together.
Yeah, I think so. That's a cool thing. Hey, audience, you're witnessing a friendship moment. Like a live friendship moment.
Well, I
that
think
is
it
now
goes to show that in many ways Star Trek TNG is like the mortar that puts bricks, sticks bricks together. It's like you can be from different places, from different times, but you can watch this timeless show that happens in a nondescript location and be bonded to someone who comes from a totally different place.
wow.
That's really nice.
I'm gonna like take that and use it because so I've been asked to give a promo of my show to put on another podcast, which is very exciting.
That's awesome.
I can't remember the name of the other podcast, and so that's really embarrassing. And hopefully they're not watching this right now. But
you could just
Is
edit
it
it
Jerry
out.
Taylor's podcast?
Oh,
no, it's not. And thank goodness Jerry Taylor's still alive. So I meant to say earlier, Jerry Taylor, since you were still alive at the time of this episode, not only do I, bow to your greatness, I apologize that I thought you were a male instead of a female, but I think the writer of this episode would forgive me because she is awesome. Hopefully,
And because this is the struggle we must continually live with.
yes, and one day we'll overcome it, like in the 24th century. But Jerry Taylor, you are invited onto. I'm gonna find a way to contact you. I'd love to talk to you actually, and do a sidebar, more serious version of Starfleet Boy, where I actually would love to ask you questions. And so, what's that?
a Q&A.
A Q&A, like Starfleet Boy interviews. It could happen. This could be a thing.
It could definitely happen. Are you kidding me? Of course.
Anyways, Jerry Taylor, I announce my intention to you here on this episode. So do you guys? I have questions for you, or
Yeah.
I guess before. Well, maybe some of these questions are questions that you have for me, but do you guys remember what betazoids are? And did you know the speech where like the kind of scene where Admiral Satie and Picard are having a back and forth, and she questions he questions his use of a betazoid in her interrogations or her whatever, and then she like fights back by saying, well, you have one on your ship, so like what about you? And then this whole conversation about the ethics of using someone who can read your emotions or your thoughts during a trial, like what that came into play. But did you guys remember what betazoids were and all that stuff? Did we ever talk about them before?
Is it Commander Troy?
She's a commander later, so very good. But yes,
Oh,
Counselor Troy.
Counselor Troy. Sorry, she's a Betazoid.
Yeah, so she's a half Betazoid.
So it's like I remember I think the very first time we did your podcast, you explained what it was to me. So it's like since she's half, it's not as strong, but they're pretty much in tune with like your emotions and your vibes and
right,
what you're
impressions,
like
yeah.
putting out there.
So yeah, she would be considered like an empath. Um, basically instead of a telepath, which her mother is a telepath. So
Oh, that's interesting.
exactly.
I have terrible memory. I did not remember that.
Oh, okay, cool.
That's pretty much all I have to add there, except that we could use more empaths in this world.
do you do you guys think that empathicness is like a on a much like smaller scale an ability that has to kind of be refined, or do you think it's an inherent thing that humans do?
I think it takes a lot of practice and a lot of research, uh, because it's like a skill. It's like it's something you have to learn. There are ways to do it. There are tricks to help make it easier. I just think like it's a skill. It's a skill. It's like people who can play a musical instrument.
Real
They decided to put their mind to it.
I'm gonna say I'm like halfway with Jamie. I think that it definitely there are some situations where it's more apparent than others, and there's some times where you have to like really understand what someone else is going through, which might be hard because you haven't gone through it and you don't understand it yourself. So I do see what Jamie's saying that it is a bit of a skill, um, but I also feel like everyone has a bit of it in them.
Oftentimes I hear empathic ability as a name for people who are adept at empathy. Um, and I think I've had the pleasure of being around very empathetic, or how would you say it, like empathic people?
Empathetic.
Empathetic. I
Empathetic.
think empathetic, because empathic goes into the power, like
That's
it's
right.
used for like a power. Yeah, you're right. So empathetic people though seem to exhibit an empathic power, which is really impressive. Like when you're around someone like that. Um, I do agree. I think that both of you are probably right, because I don't know what to think of it. Except that if the only thing that comes to mind is that like I think that humans, and I have no, this is just based on like a lot of nature programs that I've watched, no actual like study in this subject. But I think that humans might uh tie their empathic centers into their deepest emotional centers somehow. Like I think that like when I watch Arthur, my cat, I think that like I almost think that I have to completely go into this like empathetic state to communicate with him, and it works because like I start to see, oh, he's leading me to something. Oh, okay, he wants a treat. Like he's training me in a way.
Right.
But to tune into him when I'm just being like a regular human, in my baseline of operations, I guess you could call it, I often don't catch what Arthur's trying to say. So I think that like I think empathy is tied into something really deep, and probably animals are like really good at empathy. I don't know, or maybe they're even crossing the line into being empaths in some way, because they certainly do have a way to like, communicate without words or like emotions that we are used to. So I
Yeah,
don't
I mean, I definitely
know.
animals. I mean, animals. Most animals, at least, are slightly more impulsive than humans, and I think empathy might actually be tied to emotional impulse a little bit.
Nice.
Um, by the way, I just quickly Googled empathy, and it
Ooh.
said that there was this study that happened in 2016 where they looked at where your brain's empathetic center is. And just a really interesting thing that was brought up was that empathy and the generosity it sparks are essential human traits. And although scientists have investigated these behaviors in depth, the neural mechanisms behind them are not fully understood. And then it also talks about how essentially empathy is essential to being human. But that being said, some individuals, especially those with personality disorders, do not have this hardwired ability. So this is why there's a certain part of your brain that has it, and some people don't have it as much. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it totally does make sense.
Question. If Counselor Troy is an empath, she experiences like a higher plane of empathy to other humans. Do you think that makes her a superior human or a more evolutionarily advanced human?
Well, it doesn't make her human at all, but like I understand what you're saying. Like,
individual.
Yeah, I would say that like she would be like you know, a non-Homo sapien, so like whatever Homo universalis, let's call it. Let's say that we figure out like these bipedal, similar looking aliens are all kind of actually related, which Star Trek kind of gets to eventually. But I think that like if I'm honest, I look at any deviation from the norm as not advancement per se, but as interesting necessity. I don't know. like I don't see like you can't deny the norm. You can't deny that like, you know, humans like are advancing at like a very steady rate. So like you have people that are like extremely normal, and then you have like a gradient that goes all the way up to like extraordinarily, you know, different. And I think that like an empath today, like Counselor Troy level, would be like what we would call a mutant, perhaps, like someone who's like far from what humans are capable of. So yeah, she would be advanced in terms of her utilization of empathy or understanding of it, but I would not call her an advanced in every way. Do you know what I mean? Like she wouldn't be like superior or anything like
Interesting. That. She kind of disappeared after the start of the episode, didn't she?
I know they didn't. I didn't think they wanted.
She was like she like solved the problem too easily, type thing.
Yeah, she would just like it was weird. Like I don't think they knew how to do two empaths in the same room.
Yeah,
that's true.
That
or
was
maybe it could be that Picard was like, "Counselor, you should stay out of this because I'm trying to make a point."
Counselor, stay out of this.
That's not how Captain Picard
talks.
I said stay out of this, or we're both gonna get hurt. Listen to me, Counselor.
Okay.
If you get any closer to me, I don't know. So, I just feel like I don't know. He's so sexy.
So do you think in the context of the future, if you were the captain of a starship and you suspected saboteurs aboard your ship, would you utilize your Betazoid counselor to root out the problem?
Yes.
You would. How about you, Sam?
Yes, but the only side question is, how do you know, like, if everyone's an even playing ground, how do you know the Betazoid is not involved in it? What if you're like, oh, I'm trusting you to be my person, and then they're the one who was the conspirator?
That is so good.
But would a Betazoid conspire?
I don't know. I guess this is where I would ask Sohail, would a Betazoid conspire? Could they do that?
That would. There's not much. What do you mean by that? Like,
well, because it's like, is it in their personality to do that? Like,
I think it's not in. I think it's. I think that's a tough question. Like, I would say that like you have to leave out any when you're conducting an investigation, right? I guess you have like it's tough because you have to decide what tools you're gonna use, and like I think it gets to the point where if I had to answer in terms of like the confines of if I'm the ship's captain and that kind of scenario, all I would say is that like I couldn't fathom my actual crew being part of the conspiracy. So it wouldn't matter if it was Counselor Troy or
That's
Commander
true.
Riker or Commander Data. Like if I can't operate with at least that much trust, then I'm a bad captain. Then I probably deserve it because I'm probably doing something to harass these people into conspiring against the Federation.
I think, well,
Like,
so we saw like the plus side at the beginning of the episode where Troy is able to like tell us or figure out that Jadon is not telling the truth. And that we find out he's the one who like stole the files or whatever. But later on, when you have Nora Satie and her Betazoid, like he says that what's his name, Tarsus is not telling the truth, but it's not related to the situation really. So like you could get, it could be like he's lying, but it's like this episode he was lying, but it wasn't really related to like the
Oh
whole
yeah.
situation.
right, which is what the
Lying about
case was,
something
right?
else. Yeah. So
Yeah,
then
he
it's
was
like,
lying about something else.
yeah. So then this also brings up this I guess another part of the episode, which is like innocent until proven guilty, and there needs to be like concrete evidence to prove to someone's guilt, not just like I have a feeling or like
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, I guess like one thing that's interesting about that also is that like Counselor Troy could have made the same, in my mind, Counselor Troy could have made the same exact mistake, except again, it comes down to where she might not have, now that I think about it, because she actually serves with Tarsus and like she would you know what I mean? Like she would know like when it's a lie about something conspiratorial, and like I guess she maybe Picard counts on her because maybe she's developed the ability to refine her intuition along with her knowledge of the crew.
yeah, that's very possible. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
I
guess.
think that's where she would win in this situation. But regardless, it's a tricky thing to use an empath in like,
Well,
in these
is
situations.
it like the equivalent of like a polygraph test?
Yeah, I would say that would be a really that's an interesting analogy to pursue because I think in a sense like they're using the empathic abilities of of a betazoid person as a barometer for truth. That's true. Good
Yeah.
point.
And like with one of those tests, like it's possible to, it's just looking at your heart rate, and if your heart rate goes up after you answer a question, that's what those tests are.
Yeah, although once again it comes down to like it's an indicator, but it is not
That's it,
the
right?
only
It's
indicator.
like not enough, it's not concrete evidence within itself. It's like it can help you get to something, but it's not used as like the primary evidence against someone.
So that's an interesting thing to talk about there because something that relevant today that I kind of see mirroring this is I don't know how much time you guys spend on social media. I'm required to a little bit because of Starfleet Boy, but I try to limit myself.
Oh, I don't.
But I but I do see this kind of awful trend, even though this is gonna be okay, audience is a little controversial here. Even though I like I have to because my show's PG-13, so I gotta like, let everyone know it's gonna be controversial.
Oh.
Even though I think that the people who are committing a lot of these like infringements, sex acts, things like that, like just in general, are probably guilty because they've been shown to do it categorically like over and over. There are some folks that are being like tried by the court of
Yeah,
public
okay, yeah.
opinion who
Definitely.
are
That's
actually fitting Mr. Tarsus's condition like right now. You know what I mean? Like they're like
yeah,
they're like being kind of manipulated by
the media.
the media, if you will. Yeah, it's an interesting time that we live in because I think that's a relevant conversation to have from this episode too. And I see it a lot just in general, and I'm like, whatever happened to like your day in court, like, innocent until proven guilty? And I know that like intuition tells me strongly that some of these people are guilty too, but it's like so hard to just like have to
It is
like
complicated. It's really complicated because there's the context, especially of courts not doing their job in terms of actually giving or giving any kind of importance to these allegations or to any kind of allegation. Specifically, if we want to speak about things like harassment towards women or whatever, I mean, you're and as well as any kind of bias against, say, race or whatever, there tends to be a disproportionate of cases that are just not never make it to court because of just systemic factors, right?
Mhm.
So it's kind of it's interesting because yeah, on one hand, it's like you want everyone to get due process, and you don't want everyone to be necessarily gaslit into being guilty or proven guilty with this kind of mob mentality. Um, but on the other hand, it becomes so complicated when
Well,
the systems aren't necessarily in place.
well, I mean, if we're getting into it, also there's like this whole there's like trial by jury, which is essentially a jury of your peers. And
Mhm.
there's definitely been cases where it's like someone's been gone to court and been the jury said they were innocent, when perhaps if I were in the jury situation, I would have thought they were guilty, or vice versa. Obviously we hear about those on the news quite a bit. So I don't know, I don't know, I just like to throw that in there. I don't really know what my point was actually.
Well, I think it comes down to I think it's important that we constantly do checks as citizens of the systems in our government. You know what I mean? Like it's not
Definitely.
so easy sometimes to, we're as a your average citizen perhaps is not exposed to the judicial system enough to warrant interest in it. Like
Sure.
This is a
and so,
random question for you.
yeah.
So, have you ever done jury duty?
No, but I'm dying to.
Is it like, are you like not available, but is it something that you can get a letter in the mail or like a phone
Yeah,
call
I've been
telling you have to do?
always been excited to do jury duty because I'm one of those people that believe it's an interesting part of civic duty, of civic responsibility. I like the court systems in general interest me. I it's like a hobby, if you will, or my parents wanted me to be a lawyer, and I think my sister a doctor, so it was like, it was very, but it's exciting too because most of my family on my father's side is somehow or another either teaching the law from Pakistan and India, or were in the legal system there, like, which was the British system, of course. But um so
Is
personally, yes, I would love to serve on jury. I've been called 3 times, and one time I went. So the process is that I think you respond by calling first, and then you set an appointment, and then that at the appointment, it's like kind of like where they decide if you're going to serve on a jury or not. They ask you questions about your, all kinds of things like beliefs and opinions and things like that. So the first time I think was when I was I forget how old I was, but that year I got delayed because of a hurricane. So I didn't have to serve because we had a
It's like
hurricane.
Oh,
Miami life.
Like it's totally Miami life. It's true. Then the next time that the next 2 times that I got called, I was working at a company where I was one of only two people who were managing the whole operation at the time, because we had like a shortage of leadership, and so um, the CEO had to write a letter requesting that my jury duty be delayed. So I'm still waiting, because when when you're delayed, they make you serve more, which I have no problem with.
Wow, are you going to like end your life with 30 years sitting on a jury?
On a jury, it might happen. I don't know.
Wow.
But I'm waiting. I'm waiting for my recall to jury duty. So if anyone in the government is watching this episode, that's a weird thing to say, but
I mean, if there's anything we've learned, it's that the government is definitely listening to this.
okay,
What's
fine.
up?
Yay, government algorithm, jury duty, ready for it. Okay.
Bonjour, NSA.
Did I answer your questions?
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys though, and then I'll give you kind of my personal feelings here in the States on a scale of 100%, 0 to 100%. How much faith do you have in the Canadian judicial system?
Like 50.
Wow.
75.
I'll start. Yeah, well, okay. Basically, it's that I think we have an okay system that um maybe is a little bit less trigger happy when it comes to comes to sending people to prison. And I do think that's a plus. I do think our system is generally more aimed at rehabilitation than when compared to the U.S. system. However, unfortunately, our legal system or our justice system here still exudes a lot of the biases that exist in the American justice system, which is basically in Canada against there's a huge systemic kind of block against our indigenous population, and there's obviously all the same kind of shortcomings when it comes to dealing with um, uh, allegations dealing with sexual harassment or assault. So, I mean, yeah, it's like on one hand, the system can work fine outside of certain biases, but it's not functioning the way it should right now, and I think it really just follows the mentality of American courts, where it's less about coming up with evidence and more about coming up with um more about like your lawyer's tactics than it is anything else. So yeah, it's flawed in my opinion.
Okay, well, I just like to add, I guess I said 75 because on a personal note, I've never had any like run-ins with the law, and anyone that I know who has had like an okay experience. So, just on a personal note, there are things that you see in the news, but like not like it's like I don't see that many things on the news as much as like in American news, you like see it a lot. In Canada, it's like, oh, like once every few months you hear about something. It's not like every day or every week. So there's that. And yeah, I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I got a really nasty parking ticket once.
How is that related?
Oh, it was brutal.
Like you had to go to court?
Nah, I don't even drive, guys. I was just trying to
Well,
introduce
and
some
I just would
levity.
like well, I was gonna say I'd just like to add that in Canada, gay marriage was legal in like the year, I don't know what the exact year, but I feel like it's like 2000,
And 3, something like
like
that.
very
Yeah.
like 2001, 2002, like very early. And a lot of things in Canada, like I think in the States, it's very like by each state, versus in Canada, like big laws are just within the whole country. Like marijuana is going to be legal in our entire country, not just like by each province. So
Yeah, we're definitely more socialist when it comes to like we give a lot more power to our federal government than we
yeah,
do
so
our
I like that's something I like about our system, where it's like something's decided at the highest court and it applies to the entire country.
I think that how many provinces are there in Canada? It's like 20?
11.
11. Oh, okay.
Are
Yeah.
there 10 or 11?
I believe there are 11.
I thought there's 10 provinces and 3 territories. Wow, we're such bad Canadian.
we're just bad in general, guys. Like Starfleet Boy is not a great source for actual knowledge. It's just a bunch of nerds talking.
Casual and informal discussion.
It's a casual and informal discussion. No, it's okay not to know things as long as we admit it on the show, and so we have to just go with that. Go with that. I didn't know there were 11 provinces. I thought there were 20.
10. There are 10, Jamie.
There are 10. There are 10.
There are
but
10
you thought there were
provinces.
20.
There are 10 provinces and 3 territories. I was right.
Jamie just wants Florida to be a province really bad so I could be Canadian. And so
I would love that. That would actually...
It was wishful thinking.
Increase the size of my family. Yeah. And like living in the country. Yeah.
Sorry, what were you going to say, Sohail?
No, I think that like we're heading in that direction on just a slower level because I think 10 provinces can rally and organize a lot easier than 50 states can. So it's like that's why, I think we're headed in that direction. I mean, the federal government in the United States has like a great deal of power, when it comes to certain things, but I would say that like I'm pretty close to Jamie. I would give the United States judicial system about a 60% confidence rating, which is up from when I was younger. I for sure thought that I was going to be wrongfully imprisoned because of who I am when I was a child. So, so I have to say that I do have a lot more confidence in the judicial system than I did when I was a teenager or younger. I mean, like I intentionally stayed out of trouble just because I was that kind of kid, but I thought if I was just at the wrong place at the wrong time, I was for sure gonna go down, and I didn't. So
that's good.
Well, I'm happy you haven't, or you didn't.
Yeah, definitely.
And so so I would say that 60%, and a lot of the confidence comes from having relationships with people who are lawyers and in the court system, and they seem to have a hopeful attitude about bringing about necessary and positive change. The fear I think everyone has is that going back to the original point, I think, which was like, why are these cases often don't even make it to court? I think it comes from the reality that I think might be overlooked often, is that there just isn't enough like human power behind the judicial system to process all these things. So a lot of this goes on like in kind of mitigation or dealings that are pre-court,
definitely.
Or someone can't afford a lawyer.
Right, or someone can't afford a lawyer. But I mean, even still, I think there are sometimes like contracts that are made with those folks, and like for example, I'll use Stormy Daniels. she got into an agreement with Donald Trump's people. Supposedly, none of this is something that I can say I know for sure. I don't want to get in trouble with the federal government here, but but she like they are the algorithms. This is gonna be the most scrutinized.
Everyone's gonna listen.
Yeah, this is gonna be
numbers on this podcast.
Like it's gonna make its way. It's being bumped as we speak up the chain of like importance on the algorithm. So just hello, every new manager that watches this.
It's like Beetlejuice. You say Stormy Daniels 3 times, and it's like, shit.
If you like our show, please tell your friends and family about it, and please subscribe to our YouTube feed. And then we also have an iTunes podcast. And if you really like Star Trek: The Next Generation, you may enjoy the show. So, anyways, she was in some kind of contract to remain silent about her experiences with Donald Trump, and she's in breach technically of that contract. So who knows like what the reasons are. I think it's wrong to even like I don't know. I think
Put
it's
her in
wrong
that situation. Yeah.
to put her in that situation, but at the same time, I think there are others who would say that that is sufficient for them, that the matter is resolved. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so who
Um,
knows?
just like a side note to this, which I something else that I thought of when I saw this episode was like um ego and hubris.
Mm,
Because like Satie clearly has, a bit of
huge.
yeah, quite a big ego, very like thinks highly of herself, and I mean it's very evident obviously at the end, but even there are certain points of during the episode when she's talking with Captain Picard and she's like, I was like, when people told me that I would have to work with you, I was like thinking that I this would be like an annoyance, and so she kind of like hints at it throughout the episode. And then at the end it's very clear. But yeah, like I would be interested in what your thoughts and comments are on that.
Well, I just wanted to quickly say, I mean, I think it was summed up. I think like Picard's attitude towards Admiral Satie was quickly summed up in his monologue at the end of the episode, where he said, Admiral Satie, I have never seen such a big ego.
Are you making up quotes
That
now?
has got to be the biggest ego in the entire Starfleet Federation.
I totally thought you were gonna go to the right place with this one, Gene.
But then because I'm sitting next to him, I saw
You had my hope. I was so intently listening to you. I did not know you were gonna make a joke.
It was a pretty good one.
It was a good one. I cracked up. It was funny. What was even funnier was Simon going, "Are you making stuff up?" Jamie, are you making up quotes? Like she was flabbergasted by your incredulity there. as as was I.
It was good. Sorry.
I thought the thing about it is the funny thing about that Simon though is that like at first I was so enamored, and even this time watching it, before her true colors come out, so to speak, I every time I fall for her, I'm like enamored of her. There's something about these people who rely on their ego completely, not ego, eagles. They are
This
eagles.
like crazy confidence. And I think I've seen this in real life too, where there's people who are not necessarily know a lot or not necessarily the most intelligent or knowledgeable, but they have like this crazy confidence that you're like, oh man, like they know what they're doing. I don't know if do you know what I mean?
I do, but I think that it's like a shame to fault the confidence because like we all work hard to build our confidence. You know what I mean? Like that's like a societal like goal. It's like, oh, you should be more confident. Like, and it's something that seems true. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I should be more confident about whatever I am, whether I'm dumb or insanely intelligent.
I also think one of my biggest things is no matter who you are or what you do, it's important to stay humble.
Right. I think that confidence and humility can be married.
Oh, definitely.
Oh wait, they are married.
What is interesting is that you could say Picard has just as much ego as Admiral Satie, but it's a different kind of ego. It's a righteous ego. It's a kind of ego that's rooted more in thinking that you kind of perceived altruistic values. And I mean, he's always like, they even mention it that he's kind of making brash decisions on occasion, or making decisions that are tough and maybe not always thinking them all the way through. And so what separates kind of a hero from a villain perhaps is not their ego, but how they choose to use it.
I think what I gathered from the ending of this episode is that at the end it comes down to you can have all the same exact traits. Everyone can be completely equal, but where the aberrations or where like the kind of that differentiator that you just mentioned between a villain and a hero occurs is completely in a place that has nothing to do with the ego in my mind or any of it, or confidence or knowledge or anything like that, but it's just your intention. Like, where does that start out? And I think Judge Satie, not to vilify her completely, because I do think she is a good person, in many ways. I do find that, I mean, like her love of her father, for example, are extremely endearing qualities. The fact that she is a professional and like has risen to the rank of admiral I mean, you don't just like, she has a very distinguished career. And I'm sure that like, among all her, career, there are probably some great things that she did that will benefit the Federation. But I think where it goes wrong is that what was allowed to prosper, what was allowed to go out of control because of maybe, people turning a blind eye and not saying something sooner, was her intentions. And in this case, I think if I had to pinpoint that, I would say that her intentions are always negative. And I don't want to get too specific and say that she wants to burn down the Federation or she wants, I mean, like, I don't think it's anything as much as that, but I think it just boils down to that she assumes the negative intention from everyone. So therefore she looks for that and she like will garner that. And that is why she herself eventually became in her career a negative intention. That's like all she operates from. Whereas I think Picard, and you see this throughout the series, and this is something that I also talk about, which, a little Kool-Aid here we learned from Apple. I think Picard more often than not assumes a positive intention from people. And so like that's where he is different. And so I think ultimately, if we all look at ourselves and we start to see that we are assuming negative intent in our own experiences in our own lives, that maybe we can just change that assumption to a positive intent and see if the outcome isn't different.
This is a bit of a no, I like this a lot. And I think this is maybe like often a tangent, but if you see someone who is assuming negative intent, like what can you do in your life? Or like how is there a way to like talk to them, or is it like each person has to kind of figure that out on their own?
I think that there is a method that can like help you to breach that barrier of like from thinking something to action, which is you know like I think something that can help you, but ultimately it does boil down to like, for example, if I am walking in the street and I see someone obviously conveying a negative intention and harassing someone, let's say, I'm going to step in and, in my red tracksuit looking like a Star Trek superhero and just be like, "Hey, what's the big idea?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But where it can get complicated is like when you have like a different relationship with that person. Let's say that's your boss, or let's say that the person is your mom, which can be the case. How do you? Oh, I know, I got all excited. I'm like, Mom, I need to talk to you right now. No, I'm just kidding. But I would say that in my experience, that what always helps is that if you distill the situation down to the most, if you yourself are assuming positive intent when you are going to speak to that person, then the outcome will always be at the very least favorable, or pleasant, I should say. Maybe. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Look,
So it's like
hope...
the next time someone's pissing you off, think of a positive reason why they might be doing what they're doing, and then approach the conversation from that. So for example, and this is I told you earlier that this is an Apple thing. It's called fearless feedback. Have you guys ever heard about this? Do you guys have any
No, I
Apple
feel like
friends?
we're the Apple friend.
No, I don't know anyone who's ever done anything for Apple.
Okay, well, I was in a commercial, just so you know, so
I'm
I
just
can
kidding. Of
speak a little.
course.
No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, fearless feedback was a method of communicating very openly amongst each other at work, and it like really brought us together as a team, because it starts out with like little things, like for example, I'll just use myself as an example. Um, uh, there was a perception among my team that I was condescending and rude and like, uh,
You?
well, but like it's there. It is there. It's not like it's not my intention, but the tone that I was using conveyed that, and I wasn't aware. I had no awareness of it, which actually this ties right back into the episode. So I think so I had very little awareness of how my tone was, my body posture, all that stuff. I had no idea. So like what I thought was just like my was conveying just like maybe confidence or like, authority, was actually conveying something completely different. And so like I was approached by an employee about it, and we use this like assume positive the employee used the assume positive intent uh kind of core to come and talk to me about it. And I forget what they said. They said oh, something like, Sohail, like, she came out to me and she said, Sohail, you're a very like exuberant and animated person. Like she like just started describing like very things like my hand gestures, my movements, my expressions, right? And then she put in, she goes, and sometimes when, I'm speaking to you, like you'll roll your eyes, and I'm not sure what you're rolling your eyes at, or like, she was very specific. And I guess that might be the key to it, is that like you should be as specific as possible. And so when she pointed out all these things, like I was like, oh, wow, okay. And I became aware, and I would know
Yeah.
that, oh, I'm rolling my eyes at an inappropriate moment, when I was probably rolling my eyes at a thought that I had or something like that. And it also taught me to be more present, and not in my thoughts so much when people were talking. And so, yeah,
Totally.
I
a
like
lot
that
of good things
story.
came of it.
I just rolled my eyes through all of that.
I know, I felt it. My empathic abilities could sense all of that.
You've
Oh my
never
god,
seen
we
it.
even so the way I wanted to bring it back to the episode, if you guys will indulge me further, because I've been babbling here,
Please.
um, is that I think that it also comes down to both Picard and, I do agree that both Picard and Judge Satie, I mean, sorry, yeah, Admiral Satie, both have pretty grand egos as it goes. And, some might argue that they should, but I think Picard has more awareness and is just than Admiral Satie has.
He's
What do you
woke.
guys think? He's
Yeah.
woke.
He's everyone's woke bay.
He is woke, man.
Okay, just to like changes to like this whole like something that was on my mind the entire episode. What's up with like her assistant's outfit?
Which the one that's doesn't speak at all and is just taking notes?
Yeah, I liked it, but it was like so interesting. I just wanted to ask you, is that like something related to Star Trek? Like, is there like a certain type of race that like or dresses that way, or like was that just out of nowhere?
Um, I remember looking up her character a long time ago, but I don't remember anything about her now. But I definitely think she's an interesting character. I noticed that something that Star Trek does, and I think a lot of science fiction does in general, is that like they tend to like help you identify a different race through like their costuming. So like the Klingons kind of all dress the same, and even like Klingon civilians that are not in the military, they have like a fashion that you begin to notice. And so I think sometimes, like with this alien, I don't think her species ever comes on Star Trek again. So I think they're just like, oh, just create something crazy, and
It
that's
was
what they
fun.
came up
I
with.
liked it.
Um, I remember it as being like really monochromatic, right? It was black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
And
was
she had that
cool.
hair that was like up on like the two little like I don't know what you call those buns.
Oh yeah, that's right. To me, the fashion on Star Trek is kind of hit or miss. It's 50-50.
I
Like
mean, uh, what was their name? I don't know if they were an admiral or whomever came in to like preside over the hearing in the last scene was wearing like a deep V. I can't remember their name, I'm afraid.
But like, you mean the outer part was a V? There was another shirt like underneath, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
That's
there
like
was
the
another shirt.
admiral. Yeah, that's like the admiral. See, like, yeah, these are just like ways that they delineate like their ranks and stuff
It
like
was
that. It's funny.
nice. It was nice.
I did like the
Yeah.
costume design in this episode because it did remind me of like runway, like couture kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Like especially Admiral Satie. I thought that was
Oh
definitely
yeah.
like
Her
good stuff going on there.
necklines.
Yes.
That just some. I love those necklines. Are so good.
I love
What
those
do you think about the
necklines.
difficult conversation? Because in a way, Picard has to kind of the way he wins in this situation is like, so she's just basically like stepping up the show each time. Like the first time she does like a small interrogation with just the crew, and then Picard's like, hey guy, let's not get carried away. So then the next time she has like an audience,
Yeah.
and he even like says something about that. He's like, I thought, why are we including an audience? And she's like, because the vile evil blah 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 does not
Yeah.
loves to hide in the dark shadows. And this should have been like a red flag. I think this was a red flag for Picard, that anyone would talk about a person in these like theatrical terms. It's like that kind of should set you off on their intentions right there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
But anyways, he kind of like out of respect, I think, allows it to occur, like, and I think that's why this episode's so good, because it's so nuanced that way. It's like, yeah, Picard could have just been like, enough of this, get the fuck off of this. Like, it's like, whatever.
Get the fuck off of this shit.
Hey, I
you
thought
imagine,
this
like-
is PG-13.
Well, no, you can say the F word once, I think, throughout the
Okay.
like, I'm going by the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America's
okay.
like standards, and so I think you can say the F bomb once, and you can use bitch as much as you want to. So we can call Admiral Satie a bitch if we wanted to.
No.
No, we don't.
No,
We don't
no,
want
no,
that.
no.
We don't want that.
Are you sure? Because she's a total bitch, right? Like, isn't she?
She's
like,
she's definitely like on the spectrum.
No.
Of,
Oh, as a side note, I had this thought, like, I knew that people seeing this episode would think that she was a bitch. And then I wondered if a man played that character, what people
I would
call
also,
him.
I personally would also call him a bitch.
Okay,
I think
good.
bitch is
Yeah.
it's like a transgendered word. It's like, it doesn't matter.
I'm glad to know that.
And my sister, just to make it even more real, my sister constantly is calling me a whiny bitch. So
woo.
yeah, all the time, constantly. So to someone, I'm a bitch.
Ow.
Yeah.
But you guys don't see me that way, do you? Wow.
No,
Jamie
of
hesitated.
course we don't.
Simon didn't even hesitate, but you hesitated.
I would no. You're
No, I'm teasing
are
you.
kidding me?
And
Best.
audience, that's another friendship moment.
Inside baseball.
But no, in all seriousness, I also, like I said earlier, I actually don't think she's a bitch. She's more of a diva, is where I would classify her
Yeah,
if I had to.
I
Like,
agree.
I
I
think
mean, she has like a huge dramatic, there's like pathos to her. Like she's sad. Her motivations are quite sad.
it's true.
She just wants to
Um,
impress her dad.
Unlike Nora Satie, Gene Simmons, the actress, not the musician,
Mm-hmm.
she still has it in this episode, and after this, so she's nowhere near the swan song phase here. And I think that, like, I have to say that, like, to convey a character as like complex as one that you simultaneously want to love but also fundamentally disagree with takes an immense amount of skill. So I have to say props to her for that.
It's
like major.
Yeah, it's a hell of a performance. It's
Yeah.
She is. I actually, one of the few notes I wrote down for the episode was just like, whoa, she is intense. Like the second she boards the ship, she's just ready. She's like, "Whoa, they brought me out of retirement. Never mind my quarters. Send me right down to the Justice Center or
She's
whatever."
eager to get back
she's
into
very
it.
yeah, she's like not wasting any time. It's true.
Yeah.
Powerful
presence. Powerful presence.
And what she's conveying is ironic in a sense because anyone who has to play this part must, but for someone older, I would imagine now that I am older as well, it's
You're not even that old.
but it's easier for me where I stand. It's easier for me to see faltering, like myself faltering as an individual in terms of like just this basic things like my body, my mind, things like that. You know, I mean, like so standing where she is as an actress in the point of her career and having to play a character who has gone past their prime, like way beyond their prime of usefulness, if you will, to her society. It's a tragedy. It's a really like it's got to be a tough performance because to make it real, you really have to tap in my opinion, to that kind of like idea or that feeling. And I think when I first watched this, I couldn't fathom. I was like, I'm never gonna get old like that. Like, you know, those were actual real thoughts
Right.
that I certainly probably had. And you don't start to feel like you don't start to empathize with her character, I think, until you get older, you know. And so I think that's an interesting layer to this episode as well.
Yeah, well, another thing was like at the end, obviously throughout the episode, it's very clear that she admires her father, and so does Captain Picard, and he brings up the quote at the end because I think that was really like the pivotal moment, is when he says the quote that her father said, and then she just like freaks out.
Was that we cannot take a fundamental principle of the Constitution and turn it against a citizen.
Yeah, which
Yeah, it was really nice.
very powerful. But also it's interesting because there's a moment there of like she was trying so hard to do something that she in her mind justified as like within what her father would have liked or something like what she learned.
Mhm.
When it really was the opposite. And I wondered if she had or she seemed to have a moment, I'm not sure, but it seemed at the end that she had this moment of like a little self-realization. But how it also must be so hard to like you think that you're doing something that in your mind is very justified and good, and then only to realize that maybe it's not, and how hard that is.
Yeah. And this is her first failure. Like
Yeah.
to also to fall from such a high point
You
can't be
learn from
easy.
failure.
Yeah, but like to imagine not learning till now, like to yeah, till like you're like 90, you know, it's like
Yeah. It's a high place to fall from.
fall from. Yeah. So
You gotta, isn't that a quote like make mistakes early on or something?
yeah, I think so.
That's
But
what
she didn't have that life. That was not Judge Admiral Nora Satie. Interesting character.
Super.
Who do we know? Like, who do we know in the real world, dead or alive, that reminds you of Admiral Satie? Or not that we know personally, like what figure in our political systems?
Judge Judy.
Judge Judy is so good. Yes.
like
Come to think of it,
you mean
why
like
did they just
swag?
cast Judge Judy?
You mean like the swag level that she has?
No, just like all together the complexity of her character. Like, does it
Yes.
remind you of anyone? And Jamie says Judge Judy, and now I
Oh.
can't think of anyone else. That's it. Like it's like
Actually, yeah, I could. Oh my god, yeah. Can you imagine
I-
Judge Judy in those outfits?
It would
we
look
should
great.
totally. If there are any Star Trek fans watching this who are also somehow connected with Judge Judy,
Who isn't?
I would I would love to have Judge Judy on Starfleet Boy. It would be an
Oh,
awesome.
she would like.
Oh man.
I would love.
We could do
that.
an addendum to this episode. No, that would be too hard for me to talk to her about.
She would put your ass in jail.
Another thing that was sad about Admiral Satie was that, do you remember that scene where before she like reveals to Captain Picard that she's called the Admiralty in, and that like she's like been in touch with Starfleet Command this whole time behind his back.
Yeah.
And she says to him that she she has no friends or relations. Like there's
Yeah.
no
Well,
one.
it
Like
was
that's
also like,
so-
okay, like at first I was like, okay, you're sharing a bit too much information right now. Um,
Wow, what a douchey response to someone saying that.
no, like, okay, I thought was more like, I thought maybe I was like, oh, this is like a professional. She was like being very professional.
Admiral
to that
Satie,
point.
you're sharing too much information right now.
No, okay, let me just clarify.
Admiral Satie,
Okay, can I clarify?
are you trying to tell me you're looking for a friend?
Because she was so like professional up to that point. She was very like business only. And
It's
so
true.
then it was like very,
It's
it
true.
was like, oh, okay.
That was just her overconfidence. She thought, I can tell Picard anything now. I've got him where I want him.
Well, she
She's
actually,
like-
I don't know if this was like, if she was playing him the whole time, or it was closer to the end that she tried
I
to.
think
like,
I think it's telling when she says she has no friends or relations that she had no intention of being his friend. Like that was like from the start she
Oh,
was using him.
because there's a point where he's
Yeah.
like, "Can I talk to you?" And she's like, "Of course, because you're my partner."
But it's going back to I think that goes back to like kind of like something we were talking about earlier, that where you can actually teach the skill of empathy without having perhaps
yeah, I guess,
the
yeah.
the empathy there. This is definitely like something I think that like folks that come out of like any kind of customer service environment will tell you that like you're kind of forced to draw on your empathy in an unnatural way, if that makes any sense.
I had like this whole story where I was like very upset with this customer service situation, and they just kept on being like, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. I'm sorry." And I was like, I was very upset.
Wait, what? That was
Okay.
so vague.
Okay, here's
No,
the story. Here's the story. There's this gorgeous Nike cropped sweatshirt that I really wanted.
Oh.
Okay, there's a store here in Canada called Hudson's Bay, which is kind of like Macy's, I guess.
I think I've heard of Hudson's Bay.
Okay, so online on their website, it was on sale. It was in my size. I ordered it. Then I got an email 24 hours later saying my order has been canceled, like mysteriously. So I'm like,
Oh.
what? They're like, give us a call. So I give them a call, and she's like, oh, turns out like we didn't actually have any left in that size, but never updated our website. And she's like, if you want, I can order it for you, like in a like I'm usually a small or an extra small. And she's like, if you want, you can get it in a medium. And I was like, I'm not a medium, but I really like this sweatshirt, so I'll get it in the Jamie's like making me laugh. Anyway, so I got it in the medium and I was so excited, very much looking forward to it. 24 hours later, I get an email saying my order has been canceled again. So I called them. They're like, turns out we didn't even have that one in stock. And I was like,
Wow.
well, this has happened to me twice. Like the first time,
It sounds like someone needs a inventory management system.
they seriously do. Anyway, so I was very upset, and I was like, well, like it's twice in 2 days, and I really wanted this shirt, and I'm not going to get it. And I realized that, and it was just, and the lady kept on being like, yeah, well, there's nothing I can do. So
Just like Admiral Satie.
I felt
Just
like, and I realized in that moment that
I've
it wasn't
brought
her fault.
down bigger women than you, customer service agent.
Yeah, like I realized in that moment it wasn't her
Can I
fault. but
speak to
wanted-
your manager?
I've been in touch with your manager the whole time. It's
I
over
wish.
now. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, but like to what you were saying, it's because we're called. Have you ever worked in retail? Either of you two?
My very, very first job that I had for about 3-4 months was in customer service. But technically,
Retail
okay, this
customer
is not
service.
customer service, but I'm like a healthcare professional and I deal with patients. I don't want to say it's customer service, but it's definitely like dealing with people.
But I think that like the thing is that like, are you ever asked to intentionally draw upon your empathy like at work? Like, are you asked in that specific way? Like,
Well, I'm not asked to do it. Like I do it. Like
you just do it.
I-
So
yeah.
I sometimes in customer service were asked to like overuse that skill, if you will, And so I remember in my experience at Apple,
Two
there were
apple
a lot of
bombs.
yeah, it's true. There were a lot of times where like that was like kind of like a hard thing for our employees to do. I fortunately somehow have like endless fountains of empathy. I don't know, I've been able to find the empathy all the time. So I don't know, it flows out of my ears, the empathy. But for our employees that couldn't, it was very hard. So I would always try to encourage them to just at least at the most basic level listen, be present, and genuinely answer the questions, because like I think that's what ends up being at the heart of it. The empathy is just like a veneer that helps you to calm a customer
And
down,
let me just
or
say,
perhaps
I've had
do
excellent
something like that.
customer service experiences with Apple.
I know Apple's great.
Excellent,
It's true.
excellent.
So if you don't add the listen and try to find a solution piece to it, it just will get people angrier, just like your experience with with Hudson Bay. Hudson's Bay. Wow. So Judge Satie would not have done well in retail.
Oh no.
No. But
What
on
did you guys
daytime
think?
television.
What did you guys think of did you have any questions about Simon Tarsus? I think we went over the Romulan thing and its place in Star Trek, but did you guys have any other questions about him?
No, not I didn't.
Whatever happened to that actor?
I think that he went on to work with Harrison Ford in a movie about the president on Air Force One.
Some movie.
No, but I don't know. I think he's still acting. Everyone seems to be alive who is involved with this episode except for Gene Simmons. And
well, still alive under that makeup.
Oh my gosh, forgive the disrespect.
Still out there playing those bass solos.
Oh my God. So Simon Tarsus, I did have a question for you guys, since you don't have any questions about him.
Sure.
What do you think happens to him next? Like, and what should happen? What's the right thing? I mean, like, he wasn't guilty of sabotage, but he did in fact lie on his application, and he lied about the origins of his family.
Well, I think what will happen is like probably nothing, because Captain Picard, seems to have got his back, and will probably like talk to someone about it and be like, oh, it was a mistake. And I think nothing will really happen. What should happen? Well, I feel like nothing big should happen, but I still feel like there was he did lie about something. As long as I feel like he acknowledged it and owned up to it. I think that would be own up to your mistakes and learn from them.
Yeah, I feel like he sticks around, does a good job, and has a more open relationship with the entire crew.
Yeah.
Well, just so you guys know, he eventually does go on to become Dr. Tarsus. And this is all what's considered like lore. It's not ever on screen, I don't think.
Oh.
Because what happens to the doctor that they have?
Dr. Crusher?
Yeah.
Okay, so well, on screen the show will just end and like we assume they go about their lives, and then we get the movies. So we don't really actually know what happens like in the distant future, but like in an alternate timeline, Dr. Crusher and Captain Picard get married and divorced.
Whoa!
Yeah, I know, it's pretty heavy. What's that? I don't remember. I don't think they have children. But Wesley is her child, so I guess Picard becomes father to Wesley, which was kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
But according to this article here, in 2376, Tarsus, now full MD, was assigned to the infirmary of Starbase Deep Space Nine under the command of Chief Medical Officer Julian Bashir. Dr. Tarsus ran DS9's infirmary while Bashir
was away on a 3-month exploratory mission of the Gamma Quadrant on board the USS Defiant. And that's all from the novels, so it's never seen on screen.
Okay.
Then he goes on to serve, it looks like, on the USS Aventine, which is also related to Deep Space Nine. So they've woven Tarsus's character into Star Trek, but you are absolutely right. Nothing happens to him. He's allowed to, own up to his mistake, and he's forgiven, and he's allowed to continue serving on board the Enterprise. And I can tell you from what I know about Star Trek, it wasn't like something that Picard was like, oh, we're going to just keep this a secret. Like the Federation would actually have dismissed him for his
that's what I figured.
dismissed him of his wrongness for all the right things that he's done since. So he's proven, it goes back to kind of like the idea of like, are you this one wrong act in your life, or are you the measure of all your right acts? Like, why do we ignore all the good things that you've done?
And if
stuff
anything, like that. He lied about being Romulan because he felt like he would be discriminated against or something.
Right. Or that like he would be viewed as exactly what they were trying to accuse him of as a spy. Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
Wow.
So
cool.
Isn't that a cool ending for Simon Tarsus, who's that cute-ish kind of character?
He's pretty cute. Yeah. Who writes all the lore? Like, who comes up with this lore?
Various professionals, writers, fans. I think sometimes fans get a chance to write a novel. What's that?
Have you written any?
I did write a. So when Star Trek: The Next Generation, ended, my friend Humbert, who I think Jamie, you met him, right? Didn't we eat at Cracker Barrel with him, if I'm not mistaken?
I do think we did. I think I'm quite sure I've met him.
Okay. Anyways, my friend Humbert and I were kind of distraught about Star Trek: The Next Generation ending. So we would go every weekend. We would spend our free time together in the library at the university, at Florida International University, and we wrote a whole not just a pilot. We wrote a treatment for a TV show that continued the adventures.
Aww.
So you just continued writing Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Well, it was called Star Trek Pasteur, and it took place aboard Captain Crusher's ship, the Pasteur, and it followed her adventures. So we were ahead of our time. Star Trek Voyager had done that, but we thought, wouldn't it be cool for the actress to get a new TV series? All the fans would love it, and so that was our idea, but it never came to pass.
You should put it on the internet, and maybe
I know we have all our notes, but the reason it didn't come to pass is we never really got to submitting it to the studio space. Like we kind of like. No, I know it's true. I think, but ultimately, like, yeah, there was a little fan fiction written, and I think that Star Trek has inspired me. I actually have published writings on blogs and online, and I have a book that you could download from iTunes from the iBook store called Unrelated by Sohail Fazlidin. So you can read some of these short stories that I've written. But if you read them, and you know Star Trek, you'll see that all of them are somehow loosely connected or based on Star Trek. So Star Trek's been a huge source of inspiration for me, which is why I'm here doing this. It's like my way of expressing that or giving back in a way. So
giving back.
Giving back, Star Trek. I don't know how I'm giving back, but
I'm giving back to CBS.
CBS.
Your go-to network. Or
good television. Well, I was just gonna say you have your passion and you're connecting with other people who have the same passion as you.
It's true. And some people, I think what's cool about that is that like some people are discovering Star Trek who hadn't known about it before, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, like
that
me.
is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. We got a convert in the room.
Yeah.
I know you've enjoyed every episode that you've watched so far.
Yes, I have.
It is a truly great show. It feels Shakespearean and that is kind of timeless.
This episode especially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really quickly, I guess we can't close. We've already given our ratings, so and we're going on like almost 2 hours here, so we should
Really?
probably
Wow.
it's so
Fine.
we should probably wrap it up kind of soon. But what I wanted to do is let's all go through our notes if we have any, and just see if there's anything like interesting that pops up on notes. And Simon, I'm
Ooh.
gonna show this. I'm gonna show this off because Jamie was really impressed last time, but I want to show you what my notes look like.
Sure.
I'm gonna play them for you here. Let's see, screen share, application window, and audience. Just like Jamie's disclaimer, mind the misspellings.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
cool.
like so. So these are my notes. It's called a mind node or a mind note. So you start with like your topic there, and then you just branch out into all these things here.
App?
Yeah, it's an app.
And it's for you have it on your iMac?
I have it on my Mac and on my iPhone and my iPad because this is how I take
need
notes
to get
now.
this. It's free.
So that's a
Mind
little,
note.
yeah.
Awesome.
And I find it to be very cool.
That's excellent. I'm a big brainstormer, and I enjoy that very much. So I'm actually
Nice.
on my phone right now.
Jamie like sounded like he was I couldn't see him, but it sounded like his jaw dropped when he saw my notes last time.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating tool. I'm not sure. I'm a big fan of just point form. Call me an old head, if you will, of note taking. I don't really have any standout notes from this episode. I actually stopped taking notes because I realized I just had to kind of take the episode in.
Look at that, Jamie. Look at this. Look at that. No, I'm just kidding.
It really is gorgeous, though. It looks like a supernova.
It's called Mind Node, right?
Right. Here, I'll tell you that.
There's Mind Node 5. Is that the one I should get?
That's the one I have. Yeah, it's like the latest one.
So if you're listening to this right now, this podcast is brought to you by Mind Node.
Sponsor your podcast.
I know Mind Node. I'm gonna put it in my Twitter because I do follow them on Twitter too. So
I've got this. Let me do the ad. Just a second.
Okay.
Do you wish you could take notes and have it look a little less linear, a little less cut and paste, a little more nodes? Well, we got lots of nodes. Folks, go to your app store right now. Search My Node and then click download.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.
And get your node. Get your node on.
I just got it, Sohail. I'm loving it. Thank
you.
Your node. That was like the fastest from like knowledge to adoption I've ever seen in my life.
I'm a fast learner.
You are very fast.
You know what my notes were? This is just like the scientist and nerd in me. Transform numbers into biological data.
Oh, we never even talked about
that. I was like,
my God.
Holy shit! What the that's like. Crazy.
They were converting data into amino acids.
I know.
Injecting
it's pretty
into
cool.
people's body, like that's wild. I was just like mind blown.
I do have a note about that, but we didn't talk about it. Very good. No, I'm just saying that's insane. Like we can't even do that yet. Like it's still a thing I think that would inspire future scientists to do, right?
Definitely.
As far as I know.
Definitely.
What could you do with that kind of technology that's like
thinking like what would be the application to it though?
Well, you're basically your own USB key. That's kind of
Nikes. Or your own like your photos library could just be stored inside you.
Right. It's almost like
that's like whoa. That's like wow, that's amazing.
It's kind of like, hey, where's that report? Oh, just let me put my index finger in your computer. And then boom, the report's on your computer.
Oh, sorry, I filed that report in my pants.
Yeah. Whoops.
Whoops. That's gonna totally happen.
Could you call IT? My finger's stuck in the computer again. Hey, I was fingering the computer and
wow. Okay.
We got stuck. And have you heard of My Node? Get your node on.
We already talked about all the Admiral's fashions, right?
Yeah.
did we talk about how the Enterprise, the warp engine itself exploded, but the Enterprise somehow was still working the whole time?
Yeah, it was just like casually cruising through space.
I didn't get that either, but it was like for some reason it seems so minor compared to everything else that was going on.
Well, do you know
in
what
the
I thought
episode.
about is that there's no inertia in space. So whatever thrust they initially had, they're just kind of perpetually
Oh,
moving
there's
along.
you mean there's no friction in space?
Right, there's no friction. Sorry, inertia.
Right. No, I was like confused for a second because I was like,
Right,
wait,
sorry, not inertia. There's no friction. So they're just kind of gliding through.
they're just gonna. That's true. I guess that's a good point. I have to say, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I thought the special effects were really nice. Like there were really cool details. You know, all of these are remastered. If you're watching them on Netflix, you're seeing them all remastered. So there were really cool details that I don't remember at all as a kid. Like you could see Enterprise written in like tiny letters on the actual neck of the ship where the photon torpedo bay is. So that's a neat little thing.
Yeah,
and
I did notice.
there's two Star Trek deep cuts here. The two other ships, the one ship that Admiral Satie comes on is an Oberth class vessel, and it was first seen in Star Trek 3 as the USS Grissom. And then the ship that drops off Admiral Henry is an Excelsior class vessel, which was also first seen in Star Trek 3. I didn't have to look that up. I just knew it.
Wow.
What's that? Mic drop? Is that what I did?
Yeah, you were flexing.
I was flexing, but I don't know that many things. But there are some things that I do. I do know.
Starfleet boy.
I am the Starfleet boy, so it's not like Starfleet Lord.
Hello.
Or Sir Guy, which is your new nickname. Does Simon know what Sir Guy's all about?
She doesn't. I'll have to have her watch Cupid, actually. I think she would enjoy it.
You should watch that episode and then listen to our podcast afterwards.
Okay, well. I thought this maybe relate to Guy Mativier.
It is a little bit related.
Tangentially,
Okay. So
yeah, it's true.
I could fill in
Inside baseball.
Let's see, what else do I have in my notes? You guys said you guys ran out of notes?
Yeah, I was light on note taking today.
There was something mentioned in this episode called the seventh guarantee, which is I don't think, as far as I know, on screen we've ever had like the Federation document, the binding document, the Constitution of the United Federation of Planets, if you will, ever displayed. But every now and then you get a hint about it, and I think this is the first time.
Have the fanboys made one up just based on what's been?
I haven't even looked it up. This is where the boy part comes in. You're just a boy. You don't really ask the deep questions.
I feel like it's pretty dismissive to refer to our audience as fanboys.
Fanboy is like a catch-all term. Fan folks, you know what I mean.
So I don't know what like personally I think of myself as a Star Trek enthusiast. Like I don't know that I would consider myself a fan, because oftentimes I do disagree with some things. Like for example, Star Trek Discoveries get really a show that I disagree with. So I don't know. Like, is a fan not loyal to a T, right? Like, isn't that like a prerequisite?
I think part of being a fan, I don't know, is like love-hate relationship too.
Is it?
You're in it. Well, I don't know, maybe because our hockey team sucks. That you're
but you're still a fan. That's what you're saying.
You're a fan. You're like, oh, like, you know, I'm gonna endure this, you know.
That puts it in perspective. Okay, then I guess I could be a fan then.
Yeah, well, look at Red Sox fans. They were like die hard, and their team like never won for so many years, and then.
But like the whole thing is that like a fan sticks with you whether you suck or not, right? Like through thick and thin, right? And so yeah, I guess I am a fan because I will stick through it with Star Trek no matter what. Like even though I
I was just quick to wrap up our sports terms, because a bandwagon jumper is someone who only gets on when things are good.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well.
Look, here's what I
I
want
left
to say.
Star Trek at one point, though. I did. I
You're
left Star
back.
Trek. No, I know, but like I left Star Trek for Voyager and Enterprise. I did not enjoy those shows, and I didn't watch them all the way through. But I have to say the difference with Star Trek Discovery is, and this is something I complained about, which now I'm not complaining about anymore. Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Enterprise both aired on television, and it was like the set schedule, like they came on Friday nights, let's say at 8 p.m., right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So TNG and the original series had me as a captive audience. Like I wasn't doing anything. I was a teenager. Like it was school night or whatever, or like, you just didn't go out. You didn't have like a job and a life. So you just watched
Yeah.
the shows. By the time Deep Space Nine came on and Voyager and Enterprise, I was working and I was like, traveling and getting into relationships and all these other things. So I just kind of like didn't really watch them, I have to say. And I did get reacquainted with Deep Space Nine later on and finished it all the way through. And it's an amazing series. And we have a show about it called Drunk Space Nine. And in Starfleet Boys Charter, in our constitution,
Whoa.
we're gonna watch everything and talk about it. So after Star Trek: The Next Generation, we're going back to the original series because those are the two shows that I know the most. We're already covering Deep Space Nine through Drunk Space Nine. Next, after the original series, will be Voyager or Enterprise, one or the other. But Voyager and Enterprise will have the same format and talk about them. And then Star Trek Discovery, as it continues to unfold, we'll continue to discuss. So I have, yes, come back and pledged my life, whether it be long or short, to Star Trek.
I love that. I can't wait to be asked on to discuss Voyager or Enterprise, which I've never seen.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
There's many years of this ahead of us because it's quite a journey we're on here.
I wanted to mention, so the seventh rule
guarantee, the seventh guarantee.
Seventh guarantee. It was basically the fifth, right? It was pleading the fifth. Like
I think so. Yeah, exactly. It was the equivalent of the Fifth Amendment. Yeah.
Right. It was saying that someone is not guilty because they refused to answer your question. That was really interesting.
Correct.
Powerful point.
Yeah. And it's interesting how like they altered it like enough, to where it's plausible, because it's pretty arrogant to assume that the US Constitution will be the governing document of a future society that's a global society, or even that's like in this case like a trans solar systematic, I don't know if that's a real word, but a trans solar system society, like interstellar, that's the word I was
interstellar.
An interstellar society would not necessarily, but it would have, there are fundamentals in all of the constitutions of governments that are kind of like concerned with a citizen's freedom, that kind of would come to these same conclusions. I think it's not far-fetched.
Mm-hmm.
Truth.
Yeah. All right, so
and on that note,
closing thoughts. Let's see. I don't know what to say except that I'm really happy that you guys saw this awesome episode, because it is, and I guess there's definitely a ton of things that, like, if we really wanted to dial in real deep, we could find, like, the usual kinds of, like, errors in production or, like, logic or whatever. But in this situation, just like with Simon Tarsus, the good outweighs anything that's wrong with this episode by leaps and bounds. And so it's one of those rare gems, I think. And certainly at 2 hours plus, we could keep talking about it, but we're not going to.
Yeah, I just like to add, it just shows like how fruitful our conversation was, and it's really gone by so quickly, and I can't believe it's already been 2 hours.
Yay.
And like, there's so much more we can talk about. and we touched upon things that are like super relevant to today and just philosophical and existential and just everything. And there's so much we didn't even talk about. So what a wonderful episode. And I think a classic.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, beautifully put. And
Thank you.
Jamie, do you have any closing
No,
closing
I was just gonna say, I mean, if you've listened all the way till here,
Yes.
look,
Thanks.
I know that it was a wild ride, and I know that at one point you were like, "Are they gonna talk about the episode?" And you know what? Just goes to show just how much there is to talk about when it comes to this episode. Aside from that, all I wanted to say was, get your node on.
Mind Node, brought to you by no one. So as the host, I would like to say, audience, if you have made it this far, thank you so much. We're supremely pleased that
Privileged.
and privileged. Thank you that you enjoyed our bantering and discussion and casual and informalness. And now's your chance. I'd love to hear from you. I would love to know, if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to comment down below what you think of this episode, what you remember about when you first saw this episode. And if you're listening on the podcast, please send us an email to Sohail, that's Sohail, at starfleetboy.com. And I just want to really quickly say that we do have an audience in Montreal, believe it or not, which is not Jamie, because he does not download the podcast.
I don't.
And yeah, and so I would like to say really quickly and just say that you can find Jamie hanging out at the Montreal something theater, improv theater, is it?
That's right, Montreal
Thank you.
Improv Theater.
The Montreal Improv Theater, and you should check out what they're doing. We don't have a time relevant show, unfortunately. This will air probably next week, so I can't say go to this tomorrow, but you can
Just
definitely
come
go to
by
it.
any
Just come by
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday.
and check it out. And then Sima, is it okay to plug your photography?
Sure.
All right.
Sure. Follow me on Instagram at Steet Sister. What else? Oh, and by the way, I also produce a weekly Saturday night comedy show at Montreal Improv.
Oh, wow.
Every Saturday night at 9:30.
So, Hale, is there anything you want to plug?
No, this is it. So
Okay.
feel free to write to us, and if you want to have Jamie do a piece of music for your podcast or any commercial endeavor you may have, you can find him through me, because he wants to know. No, he told on the last episode. On the last episode, he says he wants to know where the referrals are coming from. So I have to
100%.
Yeah,
if you
so
come from Sohail, I want to know.
Yeah, exactly. So
10% discount from Sohail.
there will be a discount involved, but Sohail will have to pay whatever you don't.
Yes, exactly. And I'm happy to do so. So that could be an incentive for you if you need a theme song or any kind of like work of music art. And that's it. I think I covered everything. So thank you for joining us today. Live long and prosper, and we'll see you next time.
Live long and prosper.